All right, let's dive into some interview prep today. We're focusing on the Rolling Stock Assembly Supervisor position. You give us some really good resources for this deep dive. From RoleCatcher, a pretty in-depth career guide,
Yeah?
and also some sample interview questions.
Yeah, it's a really interesting role, especially now with all the changes in technology in manufacturing these days. So,
For sure, yeah. We're going to try to help you get ready for this interview by breaking down what the job really is and working through some of those tough questions you might get asked. We'll show you how to really make your answers stand out.
and we'll look at how RoleCatcher's AI tools can help you prepare in a really targeted way, especially making sure your answers fit the specific company and the role.
That's awesome. Okay, so first things first. What is a Rolling Stock Assembly Supervisor actually do? It sounds kind of self-explanatory, but I bet it's more complicated than that.
Oh, absolutely. The RoleCatcher guide really emphasizes that. It's this mix of hands-on knowledge and leadership. You're not just putting parts together, you're leading a team, solving problems, and making sure the whole production process is running smoothly.
Okay, so you need to keep a lot of plates spinning.
Yeah, you could think of it like a conductor for an orchestra, but instead of instruments, you're coordinating people, machines, materials.
I like that. So for someone going into this interview, what are some of the big responsibilities they should be ready to talk about?
Well, according to RoleCatcher, they should definitely be prepared to talk about reading blueprints, understanding technical specs, managing workflow on the assembly line, making sure quality control is happening, and of course, keeping everyone safe.
Yeah, safety is huge, absolutely,
Mhm.
especially in a manufacturing environment. So speaking of safety, let's jump into those sample interview questions. I think this is where it gets real for a lot of people.
Definitely. And RoleCatcher picks some good ones, like how do you ensure that all safety protocols are followed during rolling stock assembly?
Okay, that's a pretty classic question, but I think it's also one where people can really trip up. What's the interviewer really trying to learn there?
It's not just about knowing the rules. They want to know if you're a leader, someone who takes responsibility. If you're committed to creating a safe work environment.
Gotcha. So it's about more than just saying, I follow the rules.
Right, exactly. They want to see that you understand the why behind the rules and how you would communicate that to your team, what you'd do if someone wasn't following the rules.
Makes sense. So instead of just listing off the rules, what's a better way to answer that question?
Think about a specific example where you really went above and beyond to make things safe. Maybe you started a new training program, or you spotted a potential hazard and fixed it, or even, had a difficult conversation with someone who wasn't following protocol. The key is to show them, not just tell them.
Show, don't tell. Okay, I like that. So let's say you're in the hot seat, you get that question. What would a good answer sound like?
Okay, you could say something like, in my last job, I noticed some technicians were getting a little careless about wearing their safety glasses, so I organized a toolbox talk where we all talked about why eye protection matters so much.
Right.
We shared some real-life stories about eye injuries, and we even had a guest speaker come in, someone who had actually been injured on the job. It really hit home for everyone. And we saw a huge improvement in people wearing their safety glasses after that.
Wow, that's a really good example. It shows you're proactive, that you care about your team's safety, and that you're willing to go the extra mile.
What about follow-up questions, though? I feel like the interviewer would probably want to dig a little deeper.
Oh, for sure. They might ask something like, what would you do if someone repeatedly refused to follow safety rules, even after warnings? Or what steps would you take to investigate a safety incident
Oh,
to prevent it from happening again?
those are tough. But I guess it's a chance to really show off those leadership skills and how you solve problems under pressure.
And this is where RoleCatcher's AI can be really helpful. You can practice these questions with it and get feedback on your answers.
Yeah, it's like having your own personal interview coach, analyzing what you say and giving you tips on how to improve.
That's amazing. Okay, so we've tackled one safety-related question. Let's move on to another one from RoleCatcher's list. I think this one's another one that people struggle with. Can you give an example of a time when you had to troubleshoot an issue during rolling stock assembly?
Mm.
This one's all about problem solving, right?
Absolutely. And being able to solve problems is so important these days, especially with rolling stock technology becoming more and more complex. The interviewer wants to see how you think on your feet, how you analyze information, how you stay calm, and come up with solutions when things get tough.
So how can our listener get ready for this type of question? I know the STAR method is popular for these behavioral questions.
Oh, the STAR method is great. It definitely helps you structure your answer. But the most important thing is to be specific. Don't just say, I solved the problem. You got to describe what the problem was, really paint a picture. Explain the steps you took to figure out what was wrong, what tools or resources you used, who you talked to, and then what the end result was.
Okay, I love that. Specifics are key. So let's give our listener an example. What if they were asked about a time they had to troubleshoot an electrical issue?
Okay, let's say during a routine inspection, a technician notices a door on a train car isn't closing right. So you could say something like, first, I checked the electrical schematics to understand how the wiring and components were supposed to work. Then I used a multimeter to test the voltage at different points in the circuit, and I found that the door control module wasn't getting power. I looked at the maintenance manual, and I traced the problem back to a blown fuse. So I replaced the fuse, made sure the module was getting power again, and tested the door to make sure it was working right. I also made sure to document the issue in the maintenance log, and I let the engineering team know that we might need to figure out why the fuse blew in the first place.
That's so good. It's detailed, it shows technical knowledge, and it really highlights your problem-solving process. Okay, now what about those follow-up questions? What could the interviewer ask to really challenge you?
They might ask, what if replacing the fuse didn't work? What would you have done next? Or how did you prioritize this issue when you had other deadlines to meet?
Okay, so they're looking for that deeper level of thinking.
Yeah, they want to see how you handle multiple things at once.
And again, this is where RoleCatcher's AI can be super helpful. You can practice these tougher questions and refine your answers to make sure they're really strong.
It's like having someone brainstorm with you to help you come up with different approaches.
Okay, let's keep this momentum going. We've got more great questions from RoleCatcher to work through, and I know our listener is ready to hear how to tackle them like a pro.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and look at a question that's more about leadership and working with your team. RoleCatcher suggests this one. Can you describe a situation where you had to motivate your team to achieve a challenging goal?
Oh, that's a good one. It's not just about technical stuff, right? It's about those soft skills that everyone's always talking about.
Exactly. The interviewer wants to see if you can inspire people, guide them, especially when things get tough. They're looking for those communication skills. You know, how you build morale, how you overcome obstacles.
So how should our listener think about framing their answer?
Think of a specific project where your team had a really tight deadline, or maybe the task was super complicated, or something happened that set you back and you had to put in extra effort. Then walk them through how you motivated everyone, what strategies you used, and how you contributed to the success.
Okay, so paint a picture for them.
Yeah, exactly.
What if there was a delay in getting some crucial parts?
Yeah,
And that put the whole production schedule behind. Could our listener use that as an example?
definitely. They could say something like, we were working on the final assembly of a new train car, and we found out that a shipment of door mechanisms was delayed because of a problem with the supplier. This was a big setback because the train car was supposed to be delivered soon. I knew my team was feeling stressed, so I called a meeting to talk about it. I explained the situation, acknowledged their concerns, and I emphasized that we could still meet the deadline if we worked together really efficiently. Then I came up with a revised plan with specific tasks and deadlines, and I assigned responsibilities based on everyone's strengths. I checked in with everyone regularly, offered support, and I made sure to celebrate small wins to keep morale up. In the end, we were able to find alternative parts, speed up the installation process, and deliver the train car on time, even exceeding the client's expectations. It was tough, but it felt amazing to see the team come together like that.
That's a great story. It shows you're a leader who can inspire people.
Yeah, and get results.
What about follow-up questions for this one?
Oh, they might ask about your leadership style, like how do you delegate tasks, or how do you handle disagreements within a team?
So it's good to be prepared to talk about that stuff.
Definitely.
And don't forget, RoleCatcher's AI can help you think through these scenarios.
It can help you practice and make your answers even better.
Awesome. Okay, let's switch gears again and look at a question that's more focused on your technical knowledge. RoleCatcher suggests this one. Can you explain the process of assembling an underframe module for a passenger train car?
This one's all about showing you understand the nuts and bolts of the job. They want to hear you explain a complex process clearly.
So how can someone prepare for this, especially if they don't have years of experience?
Even without tons of experience, you can still show you understand. Do your research beforehand. The RoleCatcher Career Guide actually has a good overview of this. You can also find videos and diagrams online to help you visualize the process.
So it's about doing your homework.
Yep, and then explaining it in your own words.
Okay, what would be a good starting point for an answer?
Well, you could start by describing the main parts of an underframe module, like the longitudinal beams, cross members, the bolster assemblies, and the draft gear. Then you could outline the basic steps of putting it all together, highlighting things like welding, bolting, and making sure everything's aligned.
Okay, that makes sense. Can you give us a concrete example of a good answer?
Sure, you could say something like this. The assembly of an underframe module starts with laying out the main beams. On a jig, these beams form the backbone of the structure. Then, cross members are positioned and welded to the beams, creating the framework, bolster assemblies, which support the bogies. Those are the wheeled structures that the car sits on, are then mounted and secured to the underframe. Draft gear, which absorbs shock during coupling and collisions, is also installed at this stage. Throughout the process, precise measurements and alignments are super important to make sure the module is structurally sound. Welding is usually done by robots for accuracy and speed, but sometimes manual welding is needed for special tasks. Finally, the completed underframe module is inspected to ensure the quality and that it meets the specifications.
Wow, that's impressive. It's clear, concise, and shows you know what you're talking about. What about follow-up questions for this one?
They might ask about specific welding techniques or about quality control measures for welds. They could also ask about the challenges of working with big, heavy parts and the safety precautions you need to take.
So they're really testing your knowledge.
Yeah, and your ability to think critically.
Okay, let's move on to a question that's really relevant today. With all the changes happening in manufacturing, RoleCatcher suggests asking, how do you see automation and AI impacting the role of a rolling stock assembly supervisor in the future?
Ooh, that's a great question. It shows you're thinking ahead about how the industry is evolving.
So how should our listener prepare for this kind of future-focused question?
Well, they should be aware of the big trends. The RoleCatcher Career Guide highlights several, like the growing use of robots in welding and assembly, the integration of smart sensors and data analytics, and the development of AI-powered systems for planning and optimizing production.
So it's about understanding how these technologies are changing things.
Exactly.
But how can our listener connect these trends back to their own skills?
They could talk about their willingness to learn new technologies and their ability to adapt. They could also highlight any experience they have with robotics, automation, or data, even if it's from a different industry. The key is to show you're flexible, forward-thinking, and excited to be part of the future of manufacturing.
Okay, I love that. Let's give our listener a concrete example.
They could say something like this. I'm really excited about how automation and AI can make things better in terms of efficiency and quality in rolling stock assembly. I'm particularly interested in collaborative robots, or cobots that can work with human technicians, to improve productivity and precision. In my previous role, I led a pilot project to implement a cobot for welding, and we saw much better weld consistency and a faster cycle time. I think as a supervisor, it's really important to embrace these technologies and to train my team to work with them effectively. I'm always looking for opportunities to learn more about these advancements and to help implement them successfully in the rolling stock industry.
That's a really strong answer. It shows you're not just aware of the trends, but you're actively seeking ways to learn and grow with them. What kind of follow-up questions could they ask about this?
They might ask you to talk about the challenges and opportunities of implementing AI and automation on the assembly line. They might also ask about your approach to training your team to work with these technologies.
So it's about connecting technology, leadership, and the human element.
Exactly.
And again, RoleCatcher's AI can help you prepare.
By analyzing the company's profile and figuring out what they're focusing on in terms of automation and AI.
That's amazing. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this segment. We've talked about safety, leadership, technical expertise, and the future of the industry with automation and AI.
And we've seen how RoleCatcher's AI can be a big help.
It's like having a personalized toolkit for interview prep. But beyond those specific questions, are there any broader insights from the RoleCatcher Career Guide that our listeners should keep in mind?
Yeah, the guide really emphasizes the importance of lifelong learning. The rolling stock industry is always changing, with new technologies popping up all the time. You have to stay up to date, be willing to take on new challenges, and always be looking for ways to learn and grow.
So it's not just about getting the job, it's about having that growth mindset.
Right. Exactly.
The guide also talks about how important communication and people skills are.
Yeah, you're not just working with machines, you're leading a team of skilled technicians. You need to be able to communicate clearly, build relationships, motivate your team, and resolve conflicts.
So it's a mix of technical skills, leadership, and emotional intelligence.
Exactly.
And finally, the guide talks about safety.
Being aware of safety and creating a safe workplace is crucial. As a supervisor, you're responsible for your team's well-being. You need to know the safety protocols inside and out, and be proactive about preventing hazards.
That goes back to that earlier question about safety on the assembly line.
Yeah, it's not just about knowing the rules, it's about living and breathing safety.
Okay, I'm feeling a lot more prepared for this interview now.
Me too.
We've covered so much.
From specific questions to big picture stuff about the role and the industry.
And we've seen how RoleCatcher's AI can help us every step of the way.
It's like having a personal team of experts in your corner.
All right, let's move on to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll talk about how to make a really great impression and show the interviewer what makes you unique. All right, so we've really dug deep into the interview process, broken down those tough questions, talked about the skills you need for this job. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about how to really nail this interview, how to stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, it's not just about answering questions right. It's about showing you're genuinely excited about the role and about the industry as a whole.
I love that. Let your passion shine through, right?
Ah.
So how can our listener do that? Any tips?
Well, first things first, research the company. Don't just skim their website. Dig a little deeper. Look at their recent news, their social media, their mission statement, even their annual reports if you can find them.
Okay, so gather as much information as you can.
Exactly. You want to understand their culture, what they value, their goals.
It's like doing your homework before a big test.
Exactly.
And speaking of preparation, don't forget about RoleCatcher's AI.
Oh, yeah. Their tools are awesome for this. You can use their platform to analyze the company and see where your skills and experience would be the most valuable.
Wow. So it does the work for you.
Pretty much.
So you've done your research, you've used the AI tools. How can our listener use all this information in the interview?
Okay, let's say you find out they're really into sustainability. You could say something like, I was really impressed by your commitment to sustainability, especially your initiative to reduce carbon emissions in your production. In my last role, I actually led a project to implement lean manufacturing, and we were able to significantly reduce waste and energy consumption. I'd love to bring that same passion for efficiency and sustainability to this role.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
It shows you've done your research and you're genuinely interested. Okay, so we've talked about aligning your experience with their mission. What else can our listener do to make a good impression?
Ask good questions. This shows you're engaged and curious.
Like what kind of questions?
You could ask about their plans for the future, like growth and expansion, or specific projects you might be involved in if they hire you. You could even ask about the company culture. What kind of people thrive there?
So it's a two-way conversation, not just you answering their questions.
Exactly.
What about nonverbal stuff? Does that matter?
Definitely. Make eye contact, sit up straight, smile, project confidence.
Be yourself, but the best version of yourself.
Right. And one last thing, send a thank you note after the interview. It's a small thing, but it makes a difference.
Shows you're appreciative and still interested.
Exactly.
Wow, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive. We talked about those tricky interview questions, the skills you need, industry trends, even how to make a great impression.
And don't forget about RoleCatcher's AI. Those tools can help you prepare and practice.
It's like having a personal interview coach right in your pocket. So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with one thought.
What's that?
You got this. You've put in the work, you've prepared. Now go in there with confidence and enthusiasm. Show them your passion for this industry.
And remember, the learning never stops. Keep growing, keep developing your skills, and you'll go far in this field.
That's great advice. Good luck with your interview, everyone, and let us know how it goes.